Oh, second day of the Retail Fulfillment Show. Here we have Alan Gourdie of Quantiful. Welcome to the Supply Chain Channel podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right, so we're gonna get straight into it. Had a little look around, your LinkedIn and all that. Did you start your career off in breweries?
No, FMCG actually.
FMCG.
With Reckitt Benckiser. But then I moved to brewing for about 15 years with Heineken.
Yeah.
Worked around the world with them in Amsterdam, London, Singapore.
No, right.
Joined telecommunications industry after that.
Yeah.
And then left there to start Quantiful about 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. It's a really colorful and wonderful journey. I just want to point out, I looked that up, and you were representing with Tiger Beer in UK?
Yes, that's right. So,
oh, wow. I'm from Singapore, so I'm like, hey, it's Tiger Beer. It has a different meaning or different brand for locals versus the foreign market. A foreign market, they think of it as an exotic beer. For us, it's like, yeah, it's just Tiger. It's the uncle's beer. It's the different. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but different.
I'll tell you a little story about that.
Yeah, man, yeah.
So I was the general manager of APB Singapore. That's a Heineken-owned company.
Yeah, I know.
And so Tiger is the big local brand in Singapore. It's in all the coffee shops and cafes and hawker centres. And the uncles, as you described them, always used to say, hey, look, if I drink too much Tiger beer, I get weak knees. And you'll forgive me, there's a expression in Chinese for that. And so we just thought it was an old wives' tale. And but our brewer looked into it and actually found there was a problem. The malt that they were bringing in to brew the beer was had a tiny little mold on it. And it was producing in the brewing process chemicals, which were in the end, if you were drinking more than a couple of bottles of Tiger beer, were affecting you. And so we had to. This was 15 years ago now. So they changed the source of the malt,
right,
and went to what's called an all-crystal malt recipe, and never looked back. And so the uncles were happy after that.
Exactly.
So no more weak knees.
No more weak knees. Okay. Well, I point out, 15 years ago, I was a young man. Now I'm more closer to the uncle age, and I appreciate the Tiger beer a little bit more now. Now I look fondly among the days when I had to drink the Tiger beer, and I do look forward to a pint of those once in a while. So then, so you covered telecommunications, started FMCG, and I also read you're also part-time for, is it Tiny Cargo?
Oh, yeah. So that's my brother's a professor of regenerative medicine at Virginia Tech in the US, and he has a number of patents, and I'm helping commercialize them.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So how do you become part-time CEO while doing that remotely?
It's really more an advisory role, but we have a small company startup vehicle there, which you need a leader of, at least on paper, and so I provide that service to him to get that, to get his dream off the ground.
Okay, all right, nice. Okay, so yesterday you had a chance to give a talk, and of course had a little chat with you as well. A lot of people talk about AI in the fulfillment space, and I assure you, you're the first guest on here where I start off by talking about AI, because it's the elephant in the room. Everybody has some sort of AI, whether or not it's real, whether or not it's actually just rebranding. So maybe what I got from your talk was that you said there was a 30% improvement in forecasting. Is that something that is AI? And if that's so, how can you elaborate on the methods, technique, or the technology applied in there?
Sure. We're an AI born and bred company, so starting 6 years ago with our SaaS software platform, it used the AI that was available then and has evolved with it, such that now we use the very latest technologies. But I think your point around this term AI and how it's sort of thrown around and applied pretty much ubiquitously to everything these days is a little bit of an issue. And of course, nowadays, many companies are, of course, interested in onboarding these technologies for productivity gains, for de-risking aspects of their business, and so on. Many reasons. But when they start to investigate how it can be deployed, it can be disappointing.
Yeah.
AI demand planning is one of the few areas, though, where organisations are seeing very real, very fast, practical, bottom line benefits from the use of AI technology. And so, to be honest, we don't talk a lot about the underlying AI technology. We talk more about the benefit and the proven results that organisations are getting. Yeah, you and I can talk a little bit about it maybe afterwards, but the improvements that we see in predictive accuracy over a what you'd call a baseline statistical forecast, the way that you would forecast if you were using an Excel spreadsheet, are around about 30%, up to 20 to 30%. And those are using things like analytical AI that's come through in the last 3 to 4 years. Listeners would have heard of technologies like deep learning and gradient boosted models, et cetera. That's now been further enhanced by what's called foundation models, which are, everybody's heard about the generative AI models like ChatGPT and so on, the so-called large language models. So they help with forecast accuracy. And now there's the next generation of foundation models, which are pre-trained time series models. Now, and again, they're improving forecasting accuracy even further. And so companies like ours, because we're deep specialists in AI demand planning, one of the primary objectives of a company like ours is to keep our customers ahead of and able to deploy those technologies as soon as they become available, because of the speed with which the forecast accuracy is improved, and therefore things like stock availability are immediately enhanced, stock turn is immediately improved, and that goes to revenue increases and less working capital. And companies are seeing that within a few months of using this technology. So coming right back to the point, whilst AI is a much overused term, there's a few areas, and AI demand planning is one of them, where you don't have to wait long to see tangible results.
Yeah, so of course, you are the purveyor of such a technologies. Hence, in your mind, every company should use this. It does kind of make sense. If in retail, it's such fine margins when you're doing this business, any little advantage you can have. So I don't want to be obvious as point out, you are purveying that, but is that something that every company in fulfillment needs to embrace?
I don't know every company needs to use it. Companies with very simple SKU portfolios with low SKU counts and single point distribution, and with products where the demand is reasonably stable, can still easily use statistical forecasting. It's perfectly adequate for that purpose. We tend to get involved with customers who have more complex distribution profiles and larger portfolios. And so for us, above 100 SKUs, we have customers up to 160,000 SKUs, for example, and then more complex distribution. So from source DCs in their import countries, like the countries they're importing, like China, through to their DCs around Australia, and then potentially through to distributors, and then potentially through to retail customers. So you can imagine, quite complex distribution, and because AI forecasting tools, or at least the good ones, forecast at the SKU by location level, then you can imagine with 6,000 SKUs, say, and 150 stores, that's a lot of computations and a lot of forecasts. And so that's difficult to manage impossible to manage on an Excel spreadsheet. And so this is the sorts of companies that benefit significantly from using AI tools like ours because of the productivity gains for their planners and their retail store managers who don't have to, be looking at or get bogged down in, thousands of lines of forecasts, notwithstanding the improvements in forecast accuracy that comes with it.
Yeah, so now that you've done so many of these things and you've improved that for so many companies, were there any interesting or surprising finds that you had that came through? Any interesting insights that you have come across?
I think because when we build a model for our customers, we obviously use their own data because that's powerful, and obviously what you've done in the past is going to be one of the main drivers of what's going to happen in future. But the further out the forecast, the more you have to start using external data. Because that contains signals which will inform the model about future volatility, which is going to impact forecast accuracy. And it's not embedded in your historical data, right? So you've got to choose external data sets which have that information in it. So the quite often the interesting thing that we find is that when we work with a company, their sales team or their marketing team or their product team will say, look, this is one of the external data sets that is absolutely, going to improve your model's accuracy. I'll use a simple example, foreign exchange, US, Aussie cross rate. You need to include that in the model. Or, weather. If you're an agricultural, customer, because if it rains, the grass grows faster, and therefore they're going to need more feed, or they're going to need less feed, or they're going to need more, crop protection like pesticides and herbicides and so on, et cetera, et cetera. So the interesting thing is when we test that hypothesis in our models, sometimes they're confirmed, but quite often there's no correlation. We're literally myth busting. And, so I think that's quite often interesting for our customers, is what really does drive their customers' demand. And so they get a better understanding of the business that they're in, the customers that they're serving, and what are the true influences on their product. And that insight is also not only valuable in terms of getting a better forecast, but it's also interesting for the marketing people, because then they can start focusing on the things that actually do drive demand, rather than some other inaccurate understanding of demand for their products.
In the marketing function, I can understand, because our hypothesis, and there's A/B testing, but do we know for sure? No, it's just we think, we feel, and we infer. If we actually had data sets that we could kind of build models off of, or at least have a better understanding, I think that would be real helpful. So,
everybody needs a better forecast, is what we say.
Exactly.
Everybody needs a better forecast.
Doesn't matter what field in. So we're talking about taking an AI-led approach. So you mentioned a little bit earlier around the different LLMs and also different data sets. So are there any specific techniques or algorithms that you use? And the question leading up to is more important, is you're only as good as what your data is. So how do you ensure that the models you have accurate, reliable, relevant data?
So when we onboard a customer, we need 4 data sets. We need the sales history, we need the inventory, an inventory file, we need a product file, and we need a facility file. In other words, what's the description of your store or your DC and so on. Now, most companies, after the big data revolution and all of that, have organised their data, got it staged, got it mapped, got it stored. So it's unusual these days to come across a company that doesn't have its data in reasonably good order. We aren't a data cleansing mapping company. So if companies that come to us that don't have that, then we advise them to find a company that can help them with that. But as I say, it's increasingly rare. So when we take on that data, we the most important thing we do is clean the history for any constraints in supply which have artificially impacted demand, because you don't want to be, if you've been out of stock and you haven't made a sale in last year, you don't want to forecast that forward. The idea of a good forecast is so we call that true demand, and it's the first insight that customers get is what a better forecast can do for their business, because their stock availability is higher throughout the year. So in terms of data, having good data and ensuring that it is cleaned and ensuring that the demand is unconstrained is the first step. And then the second step, as I mentioned earlier, is then where there's high error in the forecast, our data scientists will work with our customers and identify the reason for that. Mm-hmm. And we may need to solve that with an external data set, as I mentioned earlier, or it may be a one-off event that has impacted and we don't need to adjust the models to accommodate it, or it may be something where we need to tune the algorithms to ensure that it is reflecting, the demand and the volatility, and it is incorporated into our models going forward. So our goal is always to reduce that error in the forward forecast, which, by the way, is an ongoing process.
Yeah, of course.
After we've set it up, we just don't walk away and forget it. We're in reasonably constant dialogue with all of our customers around any error, particularly on what we call exceptions, which are SKUs which are exhibiting more volatility than expected. And we'll look at that and say, okay, well, how can we avoid that error in future?
Yeah.
So now the second part of your question was, what algorithms are we using? And so we use a technique called ensembling. And so for any given SKU in any given location, our proprietary platform interrogates that SKU location and its history, and then applies a set of algorithms which are designed to reduce the error in forecast for that particular SKU location.
Yep.
And then it'll shift to the next one, and that may have a different set of algorithms. And so this is the main difference between our technology and most other AI technologies, particularly those in large ERP, demand planning modules and large ERPs, is that they don't have that approach, because our goal is always to forecast at the lowest level in a customer's hierarchy, which is the SKU location. And different SKUs have different patterns of behaviour. So some of them have relatively smooth demand profiles, and so a relatively simple ensemble of algorithms will solve for that. So, as I mentioned, a statistical forecast with a simple tree-based model. The challenge you get is with SKUs that exhibit much more erratic demand. And there you have to use a larger ensemble quite often, and specialist algorithms. And so the pre-trained foundation models that I mentioned before can be used and are particularly good for SKUs with erratic demand. So I won't go further into it because I'm not a data scientist, and I'll get into trouble. But basically, that ensembling. Yeah. And the only other point I'd make about that is because it allows us to swap in and out algorithms, we're always experimenting with the latest algorithm. Those pre-trained models only came onto the market 6 months ago.
Right.
We were using them by November, and we found significant upside for a number of our customers by using them. So we immediately deployed them, and every point of forecast accuracy improvement. They say that 5 points of forecast accuracy improvement adds 1% to the bottom line.
Yeah, I like that.
That's a generalised statement, and but it's significant. Any improvement in forecast accuracy you can achieve, which for us, by the way, is somewhere between 80 to 95% for most of our customers, and at the sort of product level and at the SKU location level is running between 60 and 70%, about double what most legacy forecasting tools will be achieving.
Yeah, all right. So, okay, I won't quiz you on more data science questions, and I think that's safe for both of us. We don't say the wrong
Exactly.
things. Yeah. Okay, so maybe here, like, if you get to do a pitch for what Quantiful is in like 30 seconds, what would that be? How would you want the audience to remember what Quantiful does?
Oh, it is an AI demand planning tool that uses the latest algorithms to ensure the lowest error in our forecasts and provides insights into what is driving demand for your business. And so there's two powerful benefits, and those benefits turn up as immediate gains on the bottom line in terms of higher stock availability and revenue with it. We have one customer who, and I'm taking a bit more than 10 seconds to answer your question, but it's always good to illustrate with actual results. So one customer's improvement in stock availability. They're about a $1.5 billion turnover business, about $1 billion in working capital. Within a year, they'd achieved $85 million more revenue and a $30 million working capital saving. Their ROIC's about 10%, so that's $3 million cash that's just been freed up. These are significant gains from improving forecast accuracy. So that's what we do. We in the end, the means is a better forecast, but the ends is a better bottom line benefit.
Yeah. More returns. All right. So let's change of pace a little bit. I want to understand a little bit who you are, like what drives Alan. So what do you do to relax besides, of course, making people in the fulfillment industry a little bit more money, more cash in their pocket? What do you do to relax?
Well, I got a dog,
Right.
and so exercising and walking my Labradoodle is a lot of takes up a lot of time, and other than that, water sports. So I wing foil.
Wing foil.
And
Right.
so that's been a passion for several years. Before that, I was kiteboarding, and I do a bit of paddle surfing, much to the annoyance of the real surfers that are out on the water at the same time quite often. So, we're lucky enough to have a beach place, a lovely part of New Zealand called Waihi Beach, and that's a great white sand surf beach, and it's got a lot of obviously harbours and surf I can use, and then lastly I do a bit of mountain biking in the bike park behind the beach, and so that all keeps me pretty busy. And I've got an older family now. My kids are grown up, and whilst they still see them a lot, and they they're in fact one of them's living with us and just about to actually head here to come to Sydney with his partner to live and work. So mainly my wife and I enjoy each other's company, and I've got plenty of things to pass the time of day.
Right. So let's say if you had a chance to give a piece of advice to a person who's starting in the supply chain industry, or maybe even consider, what would you give an advice to a younger version of yourself?
Oh, I think the faster that you can find the and so here, if the definition here is, if you're thinking about a startup and you're thinking about, for example, a software startup. Firstly, the big advice: if you're in a corporate job or an enterprise job, and that's something that is in the back of your mind, do it sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Because it's a long journey. It's an 8 to 10 year journey.
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Don't think you're going to hit it out of the park. If you're very lucky, you might do in a couple of 3 years. But otherwise, it's a longer journey, and it's a learning journey.
Right.
And so therefore, the quicker you can learn what the niche and the focus of your software is going to be, and then get the people around you that can help you realize that very clear goal, then that sets you up to not waste a lot of years and a lot of money, your own or other people's if you've got investors, and it gets you into a scalable proposition as fast as possible. Trying to be all things to all people, or be doing consulting if you're a software company, doing PowerPoint presentations, I can assure you, don't do it. It might bring in a bit of income, but it'll just add to your the years that it's going to take you in a very fast moving competitive space to get to a product that's got, as they say, product market fit.
Yep.
And you can talk to the type of organisations that are coming along to the summit today, with confidence, knowing that you've got a best of breed software that is going to advance their business.
All right. Last question. What was the last thing you bought online that you're willing to share with us?
Oh, a book.
What book?
This is the third voyage of Captain Cook.
Okay.
Yeah, the one that I love. Historical novels, particularly around pioneering explorers, and Cook was a remarkable. He was the astronaut of the 17th century. Discovering Australia, not discovering Australia. Mapping Australia, mapping New Zealand, and this final voyage was the third voyage of Captain Cook was a book about his last voyage, where he was set to find the Northwest Passage around Alaska, which had never been mapped before, which he failed to do because of a massive ice wall. And then he sailed back to Hawaii and met his death at the hands of a local Hawaiian people, mainly because of his own foolishness. Yeah. That was what I didn't realise, was that he invited disaster and paid the ultimate price, which was kind of a sad ending to one of the titans of exploration. So anyway, that was the last thing I bought online. Was that book, but it was just a fascinating insight into this towering figure.
All right. Well, I think you see a bit of that of yourself in there. That trying to overcome the new frontiers with AI in relation to forecasting. So, well,
I wouldn't go that far. But we're all you have to be. Yeah, you have to be curious and always questing for as you say a new frontier. But I wouldn't be comparing myself with Captain Cook.
All right. Well, Alan, thank you very much for the time to speak with us, and all the best with Quantiful and all the things that you do.
No worries. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.